A very unusual trademark recently just popped up on the Japanese Trademark bot office. Now, Japan, when it comes to trademarks, they're a little different than how it is in America. They really just kind of focus on marquee trademarks, like the titles of stuff, and they don't really focus too much on, like, we got a trademark Convoy and Optimus Prime and stuff like that. And that's why we don't really focus much on the trademarks they do, and we kind of just focus on what America's doing with trademarks, and that gives us a better indicator of what's going to be happening in the future. But this is one of these cases where a trademark comes by and we go, oh, looks like something is really coming here of a new series because it's a marquee title. Let's go back to the late 90s, early 2000s if you were a Transformer fan, and let's talk about a little sub-series called Webdivers, which was created by Takara as a filler. Essentially, long story short, Beast Wars and Beast Machines wasn't doing well anymore in Japan and in America. Mostly Beast Machines had terrible sales in America, but in Japan, Beast Wars Neo sales were not doing very well. And then when they did Car Robots in Japan, the sales weren't that great either. Despite what people think of the series and the toys, just the show didn't really do well in ratings, and the sales didn't do very well. And so Takara and all the animation studios, specifically with TV Tokyo, decided let's kind of distance ourselves from Transformers for like 1 or 2 years and kind of figure out what we got to do, but we still have to have some kind of transforming toy product in the meantime. Kind of like what Brave did during the G1 era with Transformers. And thus, Webdivers was born. But that did not put an end to rumors and Hasbro thinking of stuff to do on the other side. And we'll get into that in a moment. So let's talk about this trademark. So, filed October 14th, 2020 by Furyu Corporation Limited. Now, Furyu is a licensor company that handles a lot of Takara-Tomy's video game properties and stuff like that. And most well known for their Beyblade stuff, and 90% of the stuff that they do is made mostly for the Japanese market exclusively, like Nintendo DS games and stuff like that. But this is also one of those ways how sometimes a big reveal or secret slips out because a licensor trademarks something or puts out something and it kind of gets out there. Kind of like how we found out about how the Optimus Prime design looked for the Transformers 2007 Michael Bay movie, just because a licensor who did the bath towels and the beach towels leaked out. So they filed a trademark for Dennō Bōkenki Webdivers for video games, consoles, toys, and commercials. This is fascinating, especially considering next year will be the 20th anniversary of the Webdiver series. Now, the Webdiver series, in terms of toy sales and in terms of ratings, was very middle of the road. It wasn't as unsuccessful as Car Robots and Beast Wars Neo in Japan, but it wasn't exactly a blockbuster success either. And they didn't decide to continue the storytelling with this toy line, I think primarily because of how expensive it was to manufacture it, because of its gimmick, which I'll get into in a moment. And not to mention, by the time Micron Legend, aka Armada, came out in Japan, which was a huge success, they kind of went more in that direction and left Webdivers behind, never to be spoken of again. So it looks like there's something brewing, some kind of special Webdivers whatnot in the future. Could be a new series, could be just a reissue line, a 20th anniversary kind of celebration thing, could be just maybe an anime, a video game, and a couple of figures. Maybe, who knows, there's something brewing here. But considering that a video game licensor is getting involved, it means that there could be a revival series. That's one possibility, because usually when you have a licensor, it means it's going to be more than just toys from Takara and like a masterpiece or just a standalone toy line or a reissue. Could be something much bigger, like a new TV series and everything. So what does this relate to Transformers? Why am I prattling about all of this stuff? So like I said, this was kind of the filler in between Car Robots, known as Robots in Disguise here in America, and Micron Legend, which was Armada in America. It was the filler in between to kind of buy Takara and Hasbro some time to manufacture a new series. And for 2 years, literally, there was no new Transformer series in Japan outside of, obviously, there was tons of figures coming out, media, action figures and comic books, but nothing in terms of an animation series, a big mainline series. And when those toys started popping up in the importing toy websites back in the day, Action Ace and a lot of others, Amembo was another one back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Everyone saw this as the next Transformer series coming after Car Robots. A lot of people even speculated that this was going to be what Transtech was. Just looking at the designs, not really seeing what the show actually looked like or the story. Just like, hey, what's this giant train bot? What's this, this like race car that turns into what looks like Cheetor? So there was a lot of different speculation and stuff. And I sat down with Aaron Archer at a TFCon, I remember, I want to say like 2-3 years ago, and we really talked about like what was the plans with Webdiver. And he said that it was on the table. There was ideas to take all of those molds and manufacture some kind of sequel Transformers story with it. They looked at it very hard, but ultimately in the end they kind of didn't go ahead with it, primarily because that gimmick that was associated with the toy line. Now, what I'm referring to that gimmick is the main toy of the line, which was called Gladion, which was this locomotive kind of huge transforming figure that transformed into a giant robot. He was kind of also a video game console, which you plugged into your TV, and you could play very simple kind of plug and play kind of games on it. It wasn't too bad. It's actually kind of better than some of the plug and play games we see today, but it still was a very pricey kind of thing that they had to figure out, not to mention you'd have to translate all the stuff within the video game gimmick, because a lot of it was Japanese with voice acting in it. There was a lot of voice acting in that little video game. So that was already considered a very pricey kind of thing to tackle right away. And then how it works is all the little action figures combined to this like pretty much this console figure, which activated all kinds of other gimmicks. So there was this big concern that a leader class kind of toy would have to be the centerpiece of this whole gimmick, and people would have to buy this in order to enjoy the entire play pattern of buying the smaller figures and attaching. And they were kind of apprehensive of that. Again, translating everything, just a video game thing, which is really something that Takara has been doing a lot of, but Hasbro kind of stepped out of with their Hasbro Interactive stuff. So it would have been a bit difficult. But even from a storyline perspective, and this is where it gets interesting, and I don't know if a lot of people have really heard about, but I mean, like, there was like, okay, maybe we'll take Gladion, the locomotive, and maybe that'll be Optimus Primal. And then Jaguaron, the sports car that turns into a Jaguar, that'll be Cheetor. And Griffon, which was this like blue jet that turned into a Griffin, that could be Silverbolt. It takes like, the Jetstorm concept of Beast Machines that he was. Spoiler for anyone who hasn't watched Beast Machines at this point. And, the Griffin part, and, it has that in one. And then later on in the show, which would be like the halfway point where the next big toy comes halfway, you have Daitelion, which was like this Rodimus Alpha Trion Sage character that's a headmaster but also has a Matrix of Leadership gimmick in his chest. And no joke, that's what the toy really had in a lot of ways. And when he combined with all his pieces, no joke, Daitelion was called Daitelion Prime in the Webdiver show. So there was a lot of weird like nods going on. And then, of course, on what's happening on the bad guy side. So there was a character called Garulion, and that was like this pirate ship that transformed into a giant dragon. That'd be Beast Wars Megatron. And then there was like new characters. So there was Sharkon, which was this hovercraft that turned into like a shark kind of thing. And so it was like you had Skybite, a shark in the sky, and now you'd have Seabite, a shark in water. So there was all kinds of like, they're playing with ideas. And then there was Wyverion, which was going to be G1 Starscream. So it was like a fighter plane that turned into, some kind of like dragon. And it would just keep going and going, and then like the big final toy of the line, which would be the import of Dragwan. Dragwan was this semi-truck that transformed into this giant dragon, and that would be like the rebirth of Optimus Prime into that series. And, there was this idea that they were going to take, certain characters and maybe make a Unicron around it, some original molds, all kinds of they were just playing with the idea. What if this was ported over? What if this was ported over? And in the end, again, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. They marched forward instead with Project Micron Legend, aka Armada, and the rest is history. But it was something that very closely almost became a Transformer series. Was it going to be called Transtech? We don't know. But that was the rumor within the fandom, was this was going to be what Transtech was. We obviously years later know that Transtech toys were being manufactured. They just didn't happen in the end. There was prototypes and stuff like that. But it was something that was on the table. They considered it. In the same way that if you ask, any of those guys that worked for Hasbro back then, you could ask Aaron Archer, was some of the Brave stuff considered, like Gal Geiger? It was on the table. They were thinking about it. It just never happened in the end. And same thing here with Webdivers. So years later, of course, Webdivers would get little nods in Transformers lore, more specifically from the fun publication side of things. Like Cannonball would mention, like the Battle of the Garyon Melee, which again makes a nod to that Beast Wars Megatron pirate ship I just mentioned before. And of course, other characters from Webdivers would get name drops as, Star Seeker characters and stuff like that. So they're kind of loosely tied to Transformers lore in the same way that Brave is, in that they're both created from the same toy company, and once in a while there's homage crossovers here and there. But this was something that almost became Transtech, and got so as far as kind of associating some of those molds with previously existing characters. There just wasn't really established story. Were they going to bring over the anime and dub it and have that be straight up? Or were they going to create their own kind of animation? Maybe they were going to go with mainframe and continue with the CG there. What was fascinating also about Webdivers was it used traditional cell-based animation for the humans, but all the robots were CG, and that was something they did 3 years before Energon, aka Superlink, did in Japan. So they were also kind of ahead of the curve when it came to the anime storytelling. Anyways, it's a 52-episode series. It's out there. It's been translated and subtitled, so you can watch it. You just gotta find it through your own means online. I think some of them are even on YouTube as of this recording, so you could kind of watch that series. Toys are pretty interesting. Some of them are hit or miss. The video game gimmick does work on traditional RGB televisions, so if you do manage to somehow get some of those toys, specifically Gladion, you could plug them to a RGB television and play the video game gimmick. But otherwise, it's not too much of a go out of your way to collect kind of Transformer line. They're interesting, but at the same time, it really isn't 100% tied to Transformers lore. It's just something that is like a sister series or a cousin series. And I just wanted to just talk about, because there's a trademark coming. So maybe Takara is planning something to have for us, giant robot transforming collectors, to have another piece, just like how we had Shike Leon, the bullet train line that Takara did. Now we might have this. This might be kind of the next continuation, because we might not get more Shike Leon. I don't know. But this trademark does tell us that something is coming next year for the 20th anniversary of Webdivers. So we shall see.